Welcome to another episode of Dear Parents. I'm really excited today because I get to talk with a good friend of mine, Dr. Payne Bryson. If you hear that name and you're trying to place, okay, who is that? She has written a number of parenting books that are foundational for a lot of modern parenting practices. She did The Whole Brain Child, No Drama Discipline. Her most recent book, which I often will talk with, especially parents of toddlers and elementary school age kids, is The Way of Play. She has written and worked in helping parents from a parenting practices, from a developmental standpoint for a long time, and is such a great resource, and I'm excited to get to talk with her. Today we're going to talk about authoritative versus permissive parenting. We're going to talk about gentle parenting. We're going to talk about preparing for summer and all sorts of other things. So I'm excited to bring this interview and discussion to you. If you have questions, you can always go to our Substack and comment on these posts. Or if you just have another parenting question, the place to go is dearparents.substack.com. You'll find a lot of resources there, and you can get your questions asked and answered. Let me know if there's other topics that you think would be worthwhile to talk about or others that I should interview. And I hope you enjoy this interview that will start right after the music. I can't tell you how excited I am to get to talk again with Dr. Payne Bryson. Before we started recording, we were just kind of reminiscing back. Her and I actually did a podcast several years ago, and I don't even know if it's still available. It was when your new baby book was coming out, and it was called Baby in the House.
Yeah.
And we've had the chance to chat over the years on a number of different occasions, and I'm grateful for you for coming back to chat again. I was just walking through our waiting room, and we have kind of a bookshelf of parenting books that parents can peruse.
Yep.
If their child is in therapy and they're waiting, or if they need something off the wall to try and figure something out. And your newest one was right there, The Way of Play. And it's subtitled Using Little Moments of Big Connection to Raise Calm and Confident Kids. And I think this is something that we turn to a lot in my practice as we talk about calm, confident, and connection. And I had a couple of things that I wanted to talk through with you today. But first and foremost, I'm going to put you on the spot because you have this bed behind you, and then you have all those books. Is this your main bedroom with all the books on the shelf?
No, this is,
Okay.
We call this the boat room. It's this tiny, tiny little room. Like that's how, I'm as far as I can go this part of the room. And then this is the bed. It's just a little tiny guest room.
Okay, now it all makes sense.
Yeah, it's just a tiny little guest room. It's like a little twin bed, and it's got built-ins around it. I can show you. Like, we keep our luggage up there, and I'm at like a little desk. I'm sitting at a little desk that also has built-ins around me. So it's this tiny little room. And I just put books up there because it's like one room in my house. I can go close the door.
Totally.
Hopefully we can't hear the dog bark. So it's kind of the room I do podcasts and like my virtual talks.
I think I know you well enough to give you a hard time about it's kind of weird that you have all of your books splayed out above your headboard in your bed. But now I understand.
No. In California, that's a little bit of an earthquake risk. So I guess I'm putting my guests at risk, but I don't have anything over my bed except little plexiglass frames in my room. Sometime we could do a house tour. You and I both talk about houses. I'm so happy to be here, Phil, because, well, first of all, I'm actually not doing very, very many podcasts these days. I'm just really, really invested in my clinic, the Center for Connection in Southern California, and I'm still speaking, and I'm trying to have some life balance. But when you emailed, I was like, Dr. Boucher is always a hell yes. My assistant knows you're always a hell yes. I always love talking to you. And you're one of my favorites and my go-tos. People reach out to me all the time and they're like, hey, we're starting this new venture. Who should we talk to? And I'm like, Dr. Boucher, every time.
Oh, that's so nice of you.
I just appreciate you and your work and your commitment to not only your patients, but to, kind of parents across the globe. And I just respect you. I trust you. And I just really enjoy our collaboration. So,
well, I do too. Thanks for saying all that. That's so nice of you. When I was trying to schedule with you, I was thinking of different things that we could talk about. And I feel like there's so many different areas. But the one that I wanted to start on is the different types of parents and parenting styles that are out there. And you do talk about that in The Way of Play quite a bit. And I think there's a lot of confusion. And I think it leads to a lot of parents feeling that they need to parent a certain way when it's really not in their best interest and in their kid's best interest.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is I think a lot of people hear the word gentle parent and they think that means no demands. It means their kid is always right. It means they can't correct or put boundaries in place. And I don't think that's what gentle parenting is. I think that a lot of times people don't read the books. They just kind of get the vibes of, okay,
Yeah.
if I'm going to practice gentle parenting, that means this. But they don't put all those boundaries or ways of connecting into place. And at least in my experience, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, what happens is they get exhausted and their kid gets exhausted because no one knows where anyone stands. And it
Yeah.
causes a lot of heartache and frustration because the child doesn't know where they fit in and the parent doesn't feel like they can correct without being too harsh or disciplinary. And so I guess maybe this is a super long-winded question, but gentle parenting, authoritative parenting, help me understand what's what and how parents should keep these in
Yeah.
mind as they're coming up with their parenting strategy.
I love this question so much. And actually, my dissertation 25 years ago focused on the research behind this very question. And so,
Awesome.
of course, in The Whole Brain Child that Dan Siegel and I wrote, and in No Drama Discipline, we hit on these things quite a bit as well. And it's funny, I've had people, like, I've had parents come up to me at talks or like DMing me on Instagram saying, like, okay, so I read The Whole Brain Child and I'm really, really invested in kind of being emotionally attuned and emotionally responsive and doing connect before redirect and all of these strategies. But I'm not sure, like after like a 30-minute of a reflective dialogue with my child about her feelings, about putting on her shoes, and she still won't put on her shoes, like I'm not sure what to do. And so Dan and
There's
I
that
actually,
paralysis of
yeah, and
like, oh,
Dan Siegel and I just did a 2-day event talking about, The Whole Brain Child is that book came out right when I turned 40 and I'm 54 now. So that book is 14 years old. It's a teenager. And so we did this 2-day event talking about like Whole Brain Child 2.0. And one of the things that I talked about is one way that parents may get our work wrong is to forget that it's not just about emotional responsiveness, but there's this other piece, right? And so
right.
this gentle parenting and all this stuff fits in with this. So here's the thing. I'll say one other quick little anecdote. Someone messaged me like 3 months ago, and I was getting tons of texts. Someone messaged me that I kept getting more and more and more. Have you seen the new article in the Atlantic about the new parenting approach? And I was like,
Hmm.
okay, whatever it is, it's not going to be new, but let me check it out. So I
I
go
know
and
which one you're
look,
talking about.
and it's FAFO
Right.
parenting, which stands for F around and find out, which is sort of the pendulum swing away from what people were calling gentle parenting. And
Right.
of course, gentle parenting is not new, and FAFO parenting is not new. This is the most researched construct in child rearing science across everything that's ever been studied. And Diana Baumrind in the 1960s did this massive, massive study that's been replicated over and over and over that shows that there are these two dimensions that we are thinking about as we're having this conversation. One is the kind of rules and boundaries and limits dimension, originally in
Okay.
the science called the control dimension, but I don't love using that language. And also, if you've ever tried to make a kid eliminate, eat, or fall asleep, you truly cannot control another human being.
Sure.
Anyway, so this is kind of the limits, the boundaries, the rules, kind of like being the parent in charge dimension. And then the other dimension is about emotional responsiveness and connection and nurture. So let's shortcut that and call it like structure and nurture.
Got it.
So the research is very clear and has been since the 1960s that we want to be high on both. We want to have rules and limits and boundaries and be the parent in charge. And when we do that, our children feel safe.
Hmm.
And they know this is what you're talking, you mentioned that you're like, they kind of don't know, really know where they stand, the parent nor the child. This creates boundaries that help kids and parents be predictable and have kind of cues of safety and make kids feel safe enough that they can spend their mental energy being creative and playful and learning instead of constantly trying to figure out where they stand and wondering if a grown-up's really in charge. The other dimension is the nurture, emotional responsiveness, attunement, having the kind of like connection part. And we want to be high on that as well. And where parents get confused is they tend to think that emotional responsiveness, attunement, connection, having strong relationship, and being like the rule person and the person who is in charge, and maybe even as a disciplinarian, are opposites of one spectrum. But the truth is, they're two separate dimensions that we need to be high on both. So when we're talking about gentle parenting, this is really just, it depends on how you define it. Okay, so
Right.
let's say this. Do we want to be gentle with our children? Absolutely. Do we want to be respectful with our children? Absolutely. Do we want to be emotionally attuned? Yes, yes, yes. But depending on what you do with that, so what's the other dimension? Are you not having rules? Are you not in charge? If so, that's just called permissive parenting. But if you are gentle, respectful, emotionally attuned, and you have rules and limits and boundaries and you're in charge, that's called authoritative parenting. And so it depends on how we're defining these terms. But the truth is, the bottom line is that children need both from us. And when they do, they have all these great outcomes.
I think that really helps to see that there's both those dimensions to it. So you have both the structure and the routine and the expectations and boundaries, along with that warmth and connection
Yep.
and emotional responsiveness. And I think that oftentimes, like you said, it feels like they have to be mutually exclusive. Like I'm either lovey-dovey, honoring their feelings, getting their opinions, taking their wishes into consideration, or I'm
Right.
putting boundaries in place and I'm saying no. And I'm making them get their shoes on before we get in the car or something along those lines.
Yeah.
We start our day at my office with a huddle where essentially we go through the day and who's coming in and what they need so that we're prepared for the day. Now, this works well in the office setting, but it probably would not work well with the coworkers that you have at your house. And a lot of parents feel that they are constantly being asked, what are we doing today? What are we doing today? What are we doing today? And it gets old. And I want to tell you that there is another way. Now, I would not recommend trying to do a morning huddle with your young kids or trying to get them on board with a morning briefing or something along those lines. Instead, what I would do is get the calendar somewhere where everybody can see it and know what is going on. This is by far the best way to unburden yourself from being the keeper of all of the family knowledge, whether it's the schedule today, what we're doing this weekend, if we have anything in 3 Thursdays from now at 7 p.m., put it on the calendar and let everybody see that. The way that we do it in our house is with a skylight calendar. It is a super easy tool that our kids actually love looking at. They also, outside of just the calendar, will go in and add their chores simply so that they can, chores that they've already done even, so that they can check them off the box for under their chore list and get that dopamine hit of checking something off the list. Skylight lets your whole family see what's on the docket so you don't have to be the keeper of all of the information. And right now, if you use the code Dr. Boucher, DRBOUCHER, at checkout, you'll save 15%. The link is in the show notes. They have a whole new calendar that had a glow up done to it. I don't know specifically what a glow up actually means, but it looks new and fancy and cool. So check them out at myskylight.com and use code Dr. Boucher at checkout to save 15%. I think where parents often fall into the trap is those tend to, if you're trying to do both of those, you often either fall very much into the permissive camp of like, my kid can do no wrong, or you fall into the authoritarian camp of like, do exactly as I say when I say it.
Command
And
and demand.
it seems to me
Yeah.
that depending on how you were parented, often plays a role, especially when you're stressed out or when you are in a hurry or your bandwidth is low after a long day. You
Totally.
tend to move from that middle ground of like, yes, I can
Yeah.
honor and make you feel heard and understood and also hold this boundary, to either the authoritarian, do what I
Get in the
say,
car
get in
now.
the car now, or fine, whatever, leave
Fine,
us
do
alone,
what you
go,
want.
fine.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Oh, I've certainly like swung to those,
Oh,
especially
for
when I'm
sure.
tired. Yeah. So
Yeah.
can I give a couple of examples and what you and your amazing wife are, no, I mean I haven't ever met her, but I just through you and through social the stuff you guys share about your family is such a sweet family and you guys are really intentional about this. And so you can join me in this if you'd like. But let's give a couple of examples of what we mean about how those go together and what that looks like. So let's say your kid won't get the shoes on. Okay, let's just go back to
Right.
that example. So, how do we hold boundaries and limits? You need to go. It's time to go, and you got to go. And your kid doesn't want to. They're playing, they don't want to get their shoes on, they're interested in something else. How do we hold that boundary while being respectful and emotionally attuned? Well, there are lots and lots of ways to do it. One of my favorite ways is to engage play. So that's back to the way of play. And you engage kind of joining through playfulness, which
Right.
some parents will say, like, I'm too tired to do that. But the battle actually is more exhausting. So one of my favorite
Hmm.
tools is to like pause for just 1 second, just literally 1 second, and go, okay, what is it I need to do, and how can I do it in a way that's going to work? Okay, instead of
Right.
just going on autopilot. 1 second, and then I might say to my kid, there were three squirrels, and they did the meanest, naughtiest thing you've ever heard. As soon as you get your shoes on and you're in the car, I'll tell you what happened next. Now, I don't know what the squirrels did. I haven't made it up yet.
Right.
But my kid, like, what has happened is we're joining. We're joining with our attention on something. There's an anticipation, there's a playfulness, there's an interest. They can't wait to do what's next. So eliciting cooperation through playfulness, through joining, storytelling is super helpful when you're in the car and you can't hug, you can't,
Right.
do these things. If you start a story, kids often can get regulated. Okay, so that's one approach. The other approach is, let's say your kid's starting to melt down. They don't get the shoes on. You can say, I know you wanted to keep playing. It's hard to stop what you're doing. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm saying something that is, my words and my response and my tone are hopefully matching what my child is feeling on the inside.
Right.
Okay, so my kid feels seen, they feel understood, they feel connected. And I say, you really didn't want to stop playing. It's really hard, and it's time to go. So I'm going to pick up
Hmm.
you and your shoes, and we're going to get in the car. And if you need to cry for a little while, that's okay. I'm right here with you as we get in the car. Okay,
Love
so
it.
I'm still holding the boundary, but I'm saying you can have whatever feelings you have about that, and you're safe to share those with me. And this is so important because so much of the time we minimize or criticize our kids' feelings, particularly when they're not following a rule or a boundary. But the brain is just this massive association machine where kids don't typically say, Mom, I'm feeling really disappointed about not getting to finish my project, and it's hard for me to make the transition. That's not typically how they share themselves with us. They share themselves by pouting or kicking
Right.
something or whatever. But when we respond with, like, why are you acting like that? And why are you making such a big deal about it? What
Right.
happens is their little brains make an association like, when I'm really real with my emotions and I really share how I actually feel, it doesn't feel very good. The way my parent responds doesn't feel very good. And so maybe I can't totally share who I am. So if we want to build the kinds of relationships with our kids where they feel free to fall apart and share themselves with us, which is exactly what we want. My baby is 19 right now, and I'm so appreciative of how I laid those tracks down, because now he'll share things with me
Totally.
that are more vulnerable. And if he knew I was going to minimize or criticize, he wouldn't feel like he could do that with me. So this is even in this discipline space, we're still building relationship through these reps. We don't have to be perfect, but overall we want our kids to feel safe. So even if we're saying no to a behavior, we want to say yes to their experience and their feelings. And that's where the emotional connection and that attunement and nurture piece comes in importantly.
Yeah, I think most of the parents out there are resonating with the shoes because I think that
Yeah.
is like a very classic example where the authoritative vibes just kind of, okay, yeah, but we do have to go and they do have to wear shoes.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's the perfect way to move through that. The other one that I will typically do is like, is give options, not a ton of
Uh-huh.
options, but like, do you want to wear pink socks or orange socks? Or, oh yeah, you like your socks inside out. Is this inside out or is that inside out?
Yeah.
And you can honor those kind of simple sort of preferences that they have, whether it's
Giving them
mismatched
that
socks
agent.
or inside out.
Yeah.
Like you can show them, hey, I get it. You would prefer to wear your Crocs, but it's rainy. And so we have to wear shoes so our toes don't get wet, whatever it might be. And I love what you said there too about, hey, I'm going to pick you up and move you because we can't just stay like, otherwise we're going to be stuck here. And then what's
Yeah.
going to happen is we're either going to say, fine, we're not going to the movies, or just pick them up and use our authoritarian voice and body language to
Yeah.
get them where we want to and get them in their car seat and all those sorts of things. But there is that happy medium between those two of, hey, I'm going to have to pick you up and move you. And it's okay if you're upset.
Yeah, and I love what you said that about stuck because I would even argue that us taking action and saying, we're going to do this and like we're going to get in the car now, or like I remember a time my 4-year-old was having a total meltdown, didn't want to get out of the bathtub, and
Right.
I said to him, like, well, my first in the power of showing up, we talk about how kind of every parenting moment, ultimately, if we can bring the four S's of helping our kid feel safe, seen, soothed, and secure, and knowing we're going to keep showing up for them, that kind of is my North Star. So one of the ways we stay safe, help them feel safe, is by being in charge and having these limits and boundaries, but also by being regulated ourselves and not losing it, and not
Hmm.
swinging to those extremes. So I do that. I'm like, okay, at his worst is when he needs you the most. Take a deep breath. He's had a long day. He's a 4-year-old with a still developing brain. Then I go to scene and I say, "Oh, JP, you really don't want to get out of the bathtub. You wanted to stay in and keep playing with that Lego guy." Okay, so I do that. And then I say to him, it's time to get out. And since you're not getting out, I'm going to gently help you get out. And I pick his little slippery body up. I pull him out. Then I practice soothed. And I'm like, I know you're so sad. You can cry. I'm right here with you. And as I walk through, and then he becomes from that and lots of other experiences, he knows he can count on me. And I think when
Right.
we don't lift them out of the tub and we don't pick them up and pick up the shoes, while we still connect with their internal experience, they come to learn. I guess I'm saying is I feel like we can argue a resilience piece here. And what
Mm.
happens is if we stay having a reflective dialogue with our child about their feelings, about their putting their shoes on for 30 minutes, they also make the associations and come to learn that we can't really help them move through. We're going to stay stuck in feelings for a
Yeah.
long time, and we are at the mercy of our emotional lives, and our emotions get to run the show in this house and inside of ourselves. And so I think when we say, yeah, you're really sad about putting your shoes on, but we still move forward, we actually teach them that you can still keep moving through life even when you
Right.
have hard emotions. You
Right.
can count on me to help you get to the next thing and not stay stuck in kind of feeling overwhelmed. Like it communicates co-regulation, it communicates resilience. And I do think that I think this generation has been given the messaging that is over pathologizing natural human emotions like
Hmm.
anxiety or sadness or feeling alone, that are part of the human experience, over pathologizing with that and saying that must mean you have a disorder,
Right.
or that whatever emotions we have should be the decision makers and should be ruling. And as a mental health professional, we want to have agility, and we want our kids to have agility to be able to shift and move, just like agility on a soccer field, around feeling an emotion and being able to move through it.
Totally. I think that's huge, and I think you're totally right that if we just wait, if it's the bath situation, if it's the shoes, if it's something along those lines, and we're waiting for them to come around, we're putting so much emphasis on them getting to that point
Yeah.
of calming down or whatever it might be, that they might not get there. And then we'll eventually get frustrated or give up or swing to
Right.
one of those extremes. And instead, I love what you're saying there that, like, yeah, sometimes things suck. And it's
Yeah.
okay if you feel supported and heard and you're doing something that sucks, like getting out of the bathtub when you don't want to, or putting shoes on when you don't want to, or having a limit placed on your screen time when your friends
Yeah.
don't have that limit. I think
Yeah.
that that's one that if we can pivot and talk in that realm for a bit, as they get to the teen years, this is still
Mhm.
something that is so important to make them feel safe
Yeah.
and seen and secure, even when we're doing things that they would not like, whether it's
Yeah.
curfew, whether it's limits on phones or things along those lines. I guess, are there any big kind of common examples that you see with
Yeah.
teens where this comes into
Yeah.
place?
I'm thinking about a time with my eldest who was in 6th grade and on a little league team with kids who were older than him, like a year or two older than him. And the kids made a plan to all go see a movie that was totally not appropriate,
Okay.
in my opinion, especially for my kid at that age, right? It was just a movie that was just a clear no to me. All the other parents say, yeah, you can go. And my husband and I are like, sorry, bub, like not right now. And he
Right.
was so mad at us. He was so mad. He felt left out. He felt like a baby. Like it was social capital for him. And basically we were like, we just allowed space for him to be and be like, we understand you're mad at us. We understand. That feels bad to not get to go when all your friends get to go. And so we're just acknowledging his feelings around it while we said no.
Right.
And I'll say, as an aside, I had two parents who later messaged me privately and said, I didn't feel comfortable with my kid going to that movie, but I felt all this parental, like all this peer
Mm,
pressure. The other parents
parental
were saying
pressure.
yes, and my kid. And when you said no, then I was like, damn it, I should have said no. So I think there's that piece. But like here's another really like let's go a little bit later. So as you know, high schoolers and young adults sometimes make risky, bad decisions that are not keeping themselves safe. And
Sure.
I'm always very thoughtful when I talk about my boys. I have permission to share the stories that I share. And when I don't have explicit permission or I'm feeling protective, I'm just going to be really vague about who and the circumstances and change some details. So I'll just say one of my kids, as a high schooler, made a decision at a party that was not in line with our family rules. And so he came home, and I have all three are boys, so I can just say he, and I'm not giving
Hmm.
anybody away. That's really helpful. So he came in, and I could tell immediately that he had broken this rule. And so I said, "Hey, I can tell that you have had something to drink." And as the child of an alcoholic, I'm like a drug dog, basically. I'm so sensitive. Like, I can tell from smelling someone what kind of alcohol they had, like hard or beer or whatever, and how much they've had from the breath and like even how the sweat comes out. I'm a freak around this. So I could tell, and I was like, I can tell you've had a little bit to drink. And it was a little bit, I could tell. And immediately he was like, how did you know? Um,
Hmm.
and the way I responded was, I was like, I really want to think about how I want to respond. There was no yelling. I said, I really want to think
Sure.
about how I want to respond. I want to talk to dad. And tomorrow we're going to talk about this. So the next day, I say to my kid, my number one job is to keep you safe. You made a decision last night that was not keeping yourself safe.
Right.
So my job now is to bring the reins in, and there's going to be more accountability and less freedom. And I know that that's really, really a bummer for you. I know it is.
Right.
And so, but what's going to happen next is that you're going to have an opportunity to build that freedom and that trust back up. And my kid said to me, like he didn't like the boundaries I was setting, but he wasn't, he was like, he felt really loved because I was holding the boundaries, right? And he said to me, "I'm so sorry I broke your trust." And I said, "You didn't break my trust. You just bent it. And what you did was you took a withdrawal out of the trust bank. And
Right.
let me tell you exactly how you can make deposits now." And so
Mm,
then I had really actionable, like every time you change locations, you need to inform me. Like now we're going to so and so's house. That will build trust.
right.
So I had like a whole list of things I needed in order to feel safe, that he was keeping himself safe, where the freedom would move. And so we have this whole conversation where I'm holding the rules, I'm doing these things, but I'm also connecting to my child's experience about that. I give a rationale for why I'm doing it. It's pro relationship. And so this is a way we really can hold those two pieces together as they get older and even move into their even college years.
I think that, I mean, there are so many actionable things to take away from that experience. But I think for me, one of the things is that you didn't react immediately. Maybe in your head you did, but you held it together,
Yeah.
which I think is huge for parents. And I think that oftentimes parents, whether they have toddlers or teens, feel like it's kind of like that you learned the lesson when you were maybe training your dog that like if they're peeing on the rug, you have to catch them right away and correct them instantly or they don't get it. And
Yeah.
whether it's toddlers or teens, we can talk to them later and say, "Hey, remember yesterday when this came up?" Or, "Hey, I had some time to think about what happened yesterday, and here's what I'd like to say, and here's what's going to happen going forward." Like we have time to figure these things out, and there aren't these parental emergencies where if we don't correct it, if we don't have the perfect words, if we don't have the perfect consequence right at the moment that it happens, then something bad is going to happen. So we always have to be at the ready.
Yeah, that was that science. That's true for dogs, but it's not true even for young children. And in fact, that's a really outdated thing that still many of us kind of
Hmm.
follow, even though it came from the research around operant conditioning and behaviorism out of the 50s that isn't true anymore. I mean, even the framework we use in no drama discipline is the idea that the whole point and purpose of discipline and addressing behaviors is so that kids become self-disciplined.
Sure.
And so we
Right.
work ourselves out of a job as a disciplinarian because they're handling themselves in the right way anyway. The way we get them there is through brain development and maturation unfolding, and as development does, with many, many repeated experiences of skill building and teaching. So we
Right.
make the argument that discipline is all about skill building and teaching. And so we have to ask ourselves, like, what is it I want my kid to learn and how can I teach that? And then that leads us to other questions like, is what I'm doing in the name of discipline making it more likely my child will make a better decision the next time or handle themselves better? And if the answer is no, then it's not very effective discipline, right? And a
Right.
lot of what we do in the name of discipline is not effective in terms of giving them practice building skills. It also leads us to the question, Phil, that if the whole point and purpose is to teach and build skills, we have to ask the question, am I ready to teach, right? And so it might be that we need to say, you know what, my first response is not my best one. And
Right.
I want to give parents permission. It's okay to wait. I mean, even after a nap and a snack, you can go back with a 2-year-old and say, let's tell the story of what happened earlier when you threw your shoe at mommy's face. And so that's the second question is my child ready to learn? If the answer to that is no, it's not the right time to do it. It's better
Right.
to wait and wait until they're regulated and ready to learn.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I think that's a missing piece that a lot of parents then feel pressured into having the right response at the moment of the infraction or whatever it might be, or always being at the ready with the consequence or something along those lines. But I think after hearing that, I hope parents feel like, okay, I got some time to figure this out. This is not an emergency. We can circle back on it later, and probably I'll do a better job of teaching. My child will do a better job of learning at that moment. And then
And
I think
it's
the other
shocking how often if we wait when our child is in a better state and they've had a little bit of distance. I mean, even 5, 6-year-olds and up, that if we wait and we go back to it even an hour or two later and say, hey, can we talk about what happened earlier? How often they will say, especially if you've modeled repair for them, to say, yeah, I'm so sorry. I should have da 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 da. And next time I'm like, they'll do all the work for you lots of
Right,
times.
right. If you give them the chance to calm down and collect themselves, okay, I could see why that would be an overreaction, or I really didn't need to do,
Yeah.
I didn't need to slam the dishwasher that hard, or those
Yeah.
those sorts of
Yeah.
things.
And then they'll reflect it like, I was just so mad because my brother, blah, blah, blah. Then we can empathize with that feeling and say it's okay to be mad. It's not okay to be rough with our house. So what could you do
Exactly.
next time when you're mad? Then you're getting the teaching in.
Well, the other thing that I really liked from what you said there too was about, okay, here's the boundaries that we have. And because of your choice and your actions, I, as the parent, to keep you safe, have to shrink those boundaries.
Yep.
And I think that that makes sense. And we've had this discussion with our kids over the years too is, hey, here's where we set the boundaries. Inside these boundaries, you have a ton of freedom. And
Yep.
with our, like, we have 2 dogs. Inside the boundaries, they have a lot of freedom. But if they go
Yeah.
outside our fenced area, then they end up down by the street, or they're getting to our neighbors' cows and
Yeah.
chickens.
Yeah.
They're doing things that they shouldn't do. So we then have to rein in the boundaries and
Yeah.
practice the boundaries and holding those boundaries. But then there's a lot of
Totally.
freedom to have within there. And so I think that that is the way that we try and look at it with our older kids too, is like, here's the boundaries, live inside those. Show me that you can live inside those, and we can keep expanding them
Yeah.
outwards so that you have
They
more
can be
opportunities.
dynamic based on maturation, development, trust building,
Yeah.
etc. And they
And I
should. They
think
should be moving. We shouldn't be, our teenagers should have more freedom in some areas than they did when they were kids, right?
totally. And I think that that's something that we as parents can, okay, we haven't had any big issues lately. Let's expand those boundaries. Let's give
Yeah,
them more freedom. And what can we intentionally do to give them the opportunity to gain more trust, gain more skills, gain more confidence, that
totally.
as they prepare for adulthood, that we're preparing them well for adulthood. And I think that that's something that also I really like from the way of play is that kind of zone of proximal development where,
Yeah.
okay, you're really good at this. You're not ready for this. And I used an example of when our teenager started driving. Like my first instinct, okay, she gets her learner's permit. It was way across town. And I was like, let's just let Jane drive home. I'm sure it will go fine. And luckily my better angels intervened and were like, well, there's like 2 interstates and she's not really ever driven before. Let's just go to our neighborhood and then we'll drive there too. And
Yeah.
and that was
Scaffold it.
within the zone of proximal development. Otherwise, she would
Yes.
have been the overwhelm zone for
Yeah.
sure, and it would have been very stressful and very dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have to remember as a clinician, a mental health clinician, I've seen lots of families over my career where the parents were incredibly controlling and not giving their child appropriate levels of freedom in their adolescent phase. And the children took those freedoms anyway, they just did it secretly. But, I remember saying to a couple of parents one time, they were like, our daughter's not allowed to date until she goes to college. And of course, she was dating, and the parents knew it. And they were like, but we were spying on her, so we can't tell her why we know. Like, there were all these layers of things
Right.
that needed to be worked through. But what I ended up ultimately saying to the parents, which was great, I had this session before I had kids this age, and it was really helpful for me to think about it as the words came out of my mouth, was do you want your child's first time to be dating away from you? Or would you rather have her maybe do some dating where your eyes are on it? You can have some
Right.
input, you can have some reflective dialogue. So I think just like when I think about puberty and sex education and drug and alcohol education, all of these things, I wanted my kids' first exposures to these things and conversations to be with me. So I kind of like was like, I want them to hear about this from me first before they hear about stuff in the world. So they know this is something that we talk about and all that stuff. So as I think about like as our kids leave us, which unfortunately happens when we've done a good job, they
Hmm.
eventually leave, is we want to let them get in practice with freedom. And this includes when we think about their devices. Like if we
Right.
have if we're completely controlling everything about their devices and the first time they have freedom is when they leave us, we're not getting that input and we're not getting to do that mentorship and that discipleship. So we should be thinking about what's the right amount of freedom where we can help build skills. And of course, they're going to make mistakes. So we should have
Right.
that expectation too, which means they need more mentorship and maybe more guidelines or boundaries.
Right. I think that like for us, an analogy would be like starting a bonfire or something along those lines. Like, we're not going to give our 4-year-old the matches, but maybe our 7-year-old, we can have them help stack the wood for the fire and those sorts of things so that we can practice and say, hey, here's a common pitfall when it comes to starting a fire. Here's how you make it go way too big, and here's why you don't want to do this and the other thing. But over time, we're going to get you more practice and more experience with that so that when you're out on your own, you already have experience, you have practice in a more controlled setting, and you feel comfortable and confident.
Yeah, and one other thing that's kind of interesting to think about this is around risk taking because I know like I tend to be kind of a cautious person. I really like to be safe and to I'm not like a huge risk taker person. And then I had these three boys who and I remember one time when my boys were maybe like 8 and 5 and 2, my 8-year-old said to me, "You always say be careful, and you always say like something bad's gonna happen." And he's like, "It almost never does." And I was kind of like, God,
Hmm.
I'm wasting my word. Like my words don't have any power because I'm using
Right.
it too much. And I remember reading this amazing book called Wildhood about adolescence in the wild, like among animals. And it's got this great opening story about the this part of Central California where there are all these sharks that eat all the otters. And so all the otters know don't go in that part of Central Coast. But there's one exception, and it's teenage otters often venture into those waters. Now,
Mm.
some of them do get eaten. We don't want something bad to happen to our kids, but the ones that survive are actually safer for the rest of their lives
Mm.
because they took a risk that was ended up being okay for them, and now they're predator savvy. They have more information. So I know that's kind of an extreme example, and we don't want our children to do anything that's going to cause any kind of like long-term harm or
Sure.
significant harm. But when we overprotect and we bubble wrap and we don't give them opportunities to take risks, we're actually making them less likely to be safe over time. So when you're thinking about the bonfire, right? If you're just like, you don't get to touch the bonfire ever, you don't,
Right.
then when they go to camp when they go camping in their 20s with their friends, they're not going to be as safe. They might get hurt,
Right.
right? So, but if we let them take appropriate risks within what's appropriate for their developmental stage with the mentorship, and we're letting them take risks, we're actually helping them become safer. And I think that's so important in an era where parents tend to overprotect and bubble wrap and not leave anything to chance.
Oh, I think that's huge. And I think that that is something where we as parents need to get comfortable with taking those risks too, or allowing them to fail, because
Yeah.
there's this tendency to avoid failure at all costs and to stack the deck so our child doesn't fail, and then they never learn what failure or what risk is like. And then when they're confronted with it, because of course they will, they have no idea what to do, and they aren't equipped to be ready to handle failure or risk or those sorts of things because they never had any practice or experience with that.
And do you know how children become resilient? Is through adversity. Like
Right.
you don't learn how to become a resilient person if everything's perfect and you don't have hard things. So I kind of have this formula I created that's based on 80 years of attachment science, which is adversity plus the right amount of support equals
Hmm.
resilience.
For sure.
Adversity with the wrong amount of support, either no support or too much like over involvement equals fragility. So the way we get our kids there is by letting them fail, letting them make mistakes, letting them take risks, letting them feel disappointment. Like your kid
Hmm.
doesn't get invited to the birthday party and it breaks their heart, or they have a friend that's betrayed them, it breaks their heart. Like I've said to one of my boys before, like when they had a breakup, I took my mother-in-law's beautiful words that she had used with my husband back in the day for the person he dated in college that he did not marry. She said to him, like, as your mom, my heart really breaks with you as you're feeling this pain. But as a human being, I'm so excited for you that you're walking through this pain because it's going to make you the person you're meant to become and let you feel empathy for others and to feel like the raw pain of the loss of love. Like that's just
Right.
part of life. And so I guess what I'm saying is when our kids struggle and they have heartbreak in relationships or they get left out or they feel bad about themselves because they don't have mastery in some area that their friends are good at, like if we distract them or we start calling coaches and forcing them to begging them to put our kid on the team or calling the other
Right.
parent, say, please include my child, we're robbing them of opportunities to walk through adversity with our loving care that allow them
Hmm.
to be resilient. So I think part of like kind of that risk thing that we're talking about is what you just said is allowing them to feel and allowing them to have some struggle that's appropriate. And of course, if you have a kid who's neurodivergent or a kid who is has been through something difficult or has medical, like I have a kid who had chronic medical issues, there we should advocate for our kids and we should
Right.
step in. But it goes back to that idea of the zone of proximal development. Am I doing the right amount of support that is serving their development to help build those skills? Or am I stepping in because it makes me feel less anxious? And it's not really
Totally. That
serving
is
my child's
huge.
development. And I'll
And it,
say occasionally it's okay to say, you know what, it's just easier if I do it. I should be
yeah,
teaching it to my kid, but it makes me too anxious and I'm too overwhelmed right now. I'm just going to do it. That's okay
right.
sometimes too, because you matter too, parents.
Yeah, I think you have to look at the trends and the patterns over time. But I think this day and age has made it so much harder to not intervene because, in part, it's really easy to intervene now because you can just shoot off an email or a
Yeah.
text message, and it seems like it's behind your kid's back or they're not going to know about it, although they usually will. I think figure it out. And when I've talked to
Yeah.
families about this, like the kid usually knows that somebody
Yeah.
put their thumb on the scale for the kid or the
They're
parent
far more
put
perceptive than
some
we give them
put some
credit
pressure on.
for.
They're like, why am I on the
Yeah.
team when this guy is
Yeah.
much better than me, but he didn't make the team?
Yeah.
And so I think that that is something that we constantly have to be keeping in check. And the one other thing that I'll say that makes it much harder is the ease of access to see your kids' grades. And I find that a lot of parents really struggle because they can just swipe and refresh and see what they got on the quiz. And before the kid even knows it, or before they're home from school for the day, they're talking about the test that they just took and not even getting the chance to process that. Maybe they didn't, obviously, they probably didn't do as well if we're bringing it up and bringing attention to it.
Yeah.
But those sorts of things really undermine our child's ability to take risk and to learn how to pivot and how to move through a bad grade or a situation that didn't go as expected. We can just constantly be monitoring and trying to exercise control.
Yeah. And I think parental anxiety is higher than ever. And I think part of that is I saw somewhere on like social media, I'm not going to get the numbers right, but it's sort of like our nervous systems were set up to know the kind of general news and musings of about 300 people in our
Yeah.
town, but we have the whole world coming at us and we are flooded by information and visual images and
Right.
input. And I think that's overstimulating for our nervous systems. I often, when I walk, don't listen to a podcast, don't listen to music. I just am like listening to whatever birds are chirping because
Right.
I feel like my nervous system is just bombarded. And then when we also are like micromanaging and looking at every little bit of information about our kid and where they are and what block they're walking on, like we're following,
Right.
it adds to anxiety. And I think it's overstimulating for our nervous systems too. So we need to really mind our minds,
Hmm.
and really like make sure we're paying attention where it matters and that we're not getting over micromanaging the little details.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, I want to shift gears and talk for a few minutes about summer.
Yeah.
And can we talk about the summer transition that has worked the best for your family or that you recommend for families? Because I think one of the biggest issues that I see is kids go from the very structure day to day of school to summer and then really struggle. And it causes a lot more frustration for parents as they're trying to get their child to do their chores
Yeah.
or do their reading or not play screens all the time. And it seems to me that if we can, in some ways, help to create some sort of routine, that would help to mitigate a lot of the, yeah, just do whatever kind of summer vibe that we want to, in some
Yeah.
ways, honor that, okay, it's summer. Like we don't have to,
Yeah.
you don't have to do English and math and social studies every day, but
Yeah.
we still have some sort of routine.
Yeah. Okay, lots to talk about here, but I'll say in general, if we can involve our kids in kind of being intentional about thinking about goals and desires and interests for the summer, all the better. And then I'll say that yes, as much like free unstructured playtime as makes sense for your kids' ages, whatever kids need that. And I'm
Hmm.
pretty anti academic enrichment in the summer unless a kid really needs it in order to kind of have traction to stay on track going
Sure.
forward. So not for extra enrichment unless it's something they're super interested in. Like if your kid's super interested in like coding and robots and that's like their thing, then
Right.
that's great. But I wouldn't just do like math drill unless your kid's really behind and needs it. So those are kind of a couple general principles. I think that creating some systems that set us up for success, like you're talking about, is crucial. And then I also want to say that there's kind of a list, and I gave a talk on this one time, but now don't remember exactly what I said because it was a while ago, but I think I can get close. We want to kind of think about what categories are the areas that are worth our child spending time on if they're not playing. Okay, so
Right.
free play, great. What are other areas that are great ways for our kids to spend time? One is contributing. Okay, so contributing means in the household. So
Right.
that's like daily chores or working on a
Right.
project. And it doesn't have to necessarily be just inside the house. It could also be in the community or with helping a grandparent or
Love that.
volunteering somewhere. So contributing in a way that is creating meaning for others and being part of a system is a great way for our kids to spend time. I'll say as a quick side note, a great system to put in place that's a little bit more playful, that is helpful, at least for a period of time around chores, is to ask your kid for their input or what kind of system they want to try. Usually the same system won't work the whole summer, but
Yeah.
one that worked for a long time for us was we created on little cards, little 3x5 cards or cut in half even, all the household chores and things that needed to be done. And those went in a jar. So every day they picked two things out of the jar and they could have one swap
Nice.
out. So they could be like, oh, I don't want to do
Perfect.
that one. I'm going to mix it in and pull something else. So it kind of just changed it up. And then sometimes they would swap with each other, whatever. But that kind of was instead of just whatever, it was a little more fun.
I like
They
that. And
were part
I,
of adding what goes into the jar because
I
that
think you
also
could do
forces
lots of
them to notice
variations.
what needs
Yeah.
to be done. Yeah.
I think you could do lots of variations there too that would keep it interesting or novel enough. Like you pick one and then the other people pick and then you pick another, something along those lines, some
Yeah.
ways to keep it fresh because I think you're right. Like a lot of people will do chore charts that then by mid-June they've kind of had it and
Yeah.
they've worn off. But if we can keep it novel, then they can keep contributing. Like
Yeah.
I think that is really important.
And I think too, it's funny if you ask your kids, you're like, you should put two cards in there that aren't chores. They're just something really silly. And they'll write something probably like about farts or something. I don't know. It'll go in the jar. And then if you pull that, you still have to pull another one. But that kind of
Right.
makes it fun or funny.
Oh
My
yeah.
kids love to like do pranks like that. Like sometimes I would just like on our Christmas tree, I'd find a tortilla. Like they kind of like to do funny things like that. Okay, so contributing at home and outside of the home. I think time with extended family is really, even though you may not want to, you might not want to go spend time with the relatives. It's really helpful for our kids to see generations and to be with people outside of their immediate family to feel like they're
Mm,
connected to something else. So even if that's just a week or a few days or a longer family time, that's really helpful. Some sort of mastery or curiosity. So if your kid's
mm,
really interested in baking or they want to learn, like you're like, hey, you know what would be great? It's like, what if you made us dinner once a week?
right.
Or maybe they want to sign up for a week-long surf camp because they really want to learn how to surf or whatever it is. So some sort of like building skill that's something that's fun and delightful, not for any reason to
Academics.
like get
Yeah.
ahead or yeah.
We're not taking AP
Um,
government in the summer or something like
yeah.
that. Just
And
trying.
I'm a big fan of kids having away from parents experience if they're old enough and it's developmentally appropriate, whether that's going to grandparents'
Right.
house for a couple of nights overnight or going to sleepaway camp. Those kinds of things I think are really helpful practice for both parents and kids. Give parents a break. That's really fun. Even if it's just in your community and you kind of do like a sleepover swap or something like that. Of course, make sure the house is safe and you're also doing really good sexual abuse prevention conversations with your kids, whether it's family or not. That's a whole other episode, I'm sure. But that's a really helpful thing. And then finally, time in nature. And I think even if you're just going on an evening walk with a flashlight and you're going out hunting for skunks, or you're going out and you're like looking for succulents and you teach your kids what succulents look like and you're out to I'd be a succulent detective, or you create these little tiny mini bouquets, these see if you can make them as small as possible. Whatever it is, time in nature, those are all really helpful ways to spend time if you're not just playing and having family time. In terms of screens, I would set up a plan with your kids'
Right.
input if that's appropriate, and tell your kids at the beginning of the summer, we're going to do a check-in on this after the first couple of weeks, and we're going to see if it's going well, because sometimes it starts slipping, or you
Hmm.
say, you know what, we do this, but when it's time to turn it off, we're having kind of big meltdowns. So we need to
Right.
think about this differently. And you kind of have times to reflect and shift the plan as needed.
Yeah, I think that's huge for screens too, because it's easy to get into the habits that aren't as helpful when it comes to screens in the summer. When I was like, oh, they can just do this. But I think if you do set reasonable limits and expectations, one of the things that we do at our house is we can have a universal basic income when it comes to screens, so that it's not something that is only earned or
Yep.
something where it's punished away, like you lost your screen time or
Yep.
you gain the extra screen time. We just have kind of a universal basic amount of screen time that is offered. And then sometimes we will do bonuses. Like if we really need weeds pulled, then we will incentivize weed
Yeah.
pulling with screens. But in general, if they know how much they get per day and you're consistent with the boundary of, hey, it's been 25 minutes, it's time to hit save and turn it off. If you're consistent with that, then you won't get as much whining, arguing, or trying to bargain for more.
Yeah. I'll say just in terms of bargaining, kids are around more, so they're going to push boundaries more over the summer.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite phrases, and I didn't learn this until my third kid. I wish I had learned it earlier. But there were times my kids like, "Can I have one more bedtime story or 5 more minutes of this or can I have one more of that?" And sometimes it makes sense to say, "Sure, that it is kind of early. Those books
Right.
went kind of fast. Let's read some more. I'm enjoying this too, and we have time." So the problem though is if you say yes even occasionally to those asking for mores negotiations, then they know they can keep asking. So here's what I learned that's super helpful is my kid would ask one more story, whatever, and if I would say, yeah, sure we can. If another night he would say, can we have one more story? And I say, no, we're not going to have stories. And then he would keep pushing, pushing, pushing. What I learned was here's the magic phrase. I'm not changing my mind. So
Mm,
once I said, no, we're not reading any more stories, I'm not changing my mind, or we're not having any more screen time, I'm not changing. Once I used the phrase, I'm not changing my mind, I absolutely never changed my mind. So that
that's
they
great.
knew that when I said that, it was hopeless and useless to waste energy. So
We can be
that was
flexible, but we can
helpful.
also have those boundaries
Yeah.
sort of. Yeah, no, in this circumstance, no, I'm
Yeah.
not going to do that. And then you don't have
Yeah.
to be constantly either catering to all their demands. And
Yeah.
if you give a mouse a cookie, sort of,
Yeah.
just builds and builds and builds, but you also don't have to be completely strict. Like you can have a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of spontaneity when the feeling strikes.
And I think the opposite of that is true because I certainly, as a parent, like in a moment of total overreaction, would throw out a boundary that was ridiculous. Like I would say, "Now you're not going to grandma's house," and then I was like, oh, "I have a dentist appointment. You have to go to grandma's house." Or
Right.
like I remember one time I was like, "We're not swimming the rest of the summer," and then I was like, "Okay, I absolutely cannot enforce that, or it's going to be
Right.
torture for me, right?"
Yeah.
So sometimes you might throw a limit out, and you want to change your mind. There's a huge, you can change your mind, but there's a huge difference in how you
Right.
do it. If you're like, okay, fine, you can go swimming, what you're communicating is if you push hard enough and whine hard enough, I will give in. There's a huge difference
Right.
between that, giving in, versus I'm changing my mind. So I might say to my kid, I've thought about what I said earlier about swimming or grandma's house, and I'm changing my mind. And I give a
Right.
reason, even if I have to make it up a little bit.
Mhm.
But I say, you know what, I thought about it, and I think there's a better way to do it this way. I'm changing my mind. But that's very
Right.
different than giving in. And so you can change your mind, but you can also say, I'm not changing my mind. You're in charge.
Yep. You're in charge. And I think that that's a huge help for parents that feel like they have said something that they didn't mean, or they have just become the fine, fine, fine. And so I think that all relates back to everything that we've talked about. But I love that way to kind of frame it of I've changed my mind or I'm not changing my mind as
Yeah,
a way to also model that like we can new information comes in, we can change the
totally.
plans. This has
Yeah, and
been
if your kid
so
makes a good argument and you're like, I hadn't thought about it that way. Yeah, I that makes sense to me. Let's change our mind about that. Totally
or
fine.
maybe they will come up with a bargain or a way to make up for it, and then you'll be like, yeah, okay, you did do that. Okay, we can change our
Yeah.
plans then. This
Yeah.
has been such a great conversation. I would love to have many more to talk through all the things because I think it's just helpful for parents to hear the specific approaches that oftentimes we feel that it all breaks. Yes, I've read the books. Yes, I've listened to the podcasts. Yes, I've read the Substacks. It all breaks down when it's 6:45 p.m. and we're still trying to get dinner on the table and all those different things that come up. So Dr. Tina Payne Bryson, you can find her on Instagram. You can find all of her books. And she is at the Center for Connection in California. And I am just grateful for your time and all of your wisdom today.
It's always so fun to talk with you. And thank you for being such a bright light in our world for parents and just as a trusted source of good quality science-based and practical information. So it's always, always an honor.
Well, thank you.